law enforcement has finally updated the timeline. Hi, everyone. This is Empowering True Crime Alex, and I'm here to talk about the Idaho murders and new information that we have, which we've already had, but that law enforcement has updated on their end. And we're just going to go through some of the facts in this investigation and some of the details that we have that we do know about the timeline. So I actually had looked at, this is the homicide updates page that the city of Moscow has created, which I think is excellent. And I mean, at least it has all the information in one centralized space. So that's great because I've been looking at it on the Facebook page. They do give some updates, which they've given a couple of updates since actually yesterday. But I wanted to let you know. So here, this is what prompted this. I've been wanting to talk about the timeline for a while. And it says here, so what they have been saying for the last almost 2 weeks is that Kaylee and Maddie arrived at home at 1:45. And very quickly, we saw the Twitch live stream that showed that they arrived at the food truck around 1:40 a.m. and were there for about 10 minutes. So, and then they went home. So doing the math, we're like, that can't be possible unless the food truck started a lot earlier, which historically it started at the same time, which is about 10 p.m. rather, every night. So finally, after I caught this, a lot of other people caught this, even Kaylee's sister brought this up. Why haven't they updated the timeline? There's about, 15, well, in this case, maybe about a 10-minute gap, a little over a 10-minute gap, potentially longer gap. And so finally, they've updated the timeline on this page. And it says here that after the grub truck, they used a private party for a ride home from downtown to arrive at their 1122 residence around 1:56 a.m. Arrival time has been updated based on digital evidence collected by investigators. Now, here's something that's very interesting. I'm going to go through the timeline now in a moment. I just rewatched the press conference, the first press conference. And one of the reporters asked, and that press conference was on the 16th of November 16th. And in that press conference, a reporter asked the chief if they were aware of the Twitch video. And the chief said, yes, they are aware of the Twitch video. So they were aware of it then. Doesn't take a genius to make, to put two and two together as far as the time. So why they went on and continued to say that they arrived home at 1:45 all this time, I'm not sure. So that was just a strange little inconsistency that I noticed. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. For anybody who's new to this case, I'm just going to run through some of the facts. These are the facts that we know so far, based on the law enforcement reports, as well as additional information that has been provided by the family and other close sources. Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xena Kanoto were murdered on November 13th in the residence of 1122 King Street in Moscow, Idaho. The three ladies who were murdered lived in the residence, and there were two surviving roommates. It was previously reported that Ethan resided at the home, however, has been determined that he was only visiting. Ethan is Xena's boyfriend. After 11:58 a.m. that same morning, there was a 911 call, and officers soon after entered the residence and found two victims on the second floor and two victims on the third floor. We're going to go through a little bit more in the 911 call, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign that anything was stolen, and there was no sign of SA, which is S assault. Police believe it is an isolated targeted event. However, there's still no suspect and no murder weapon found. So rightfully so, a lot of the media keep probing and keep asking, why is it still called a targeted event? Can you give us any details as to why? And actually the community at large as well is concerned, because if it's not targeted, it's a serial killer, right? So there is concern there. Autopsies were conducted on November 17th, and the Latah County coroner confirmed that the identity of the four murdered individuals and their cause and manner of death is homicide by stabbing. And the coroner stated that the four victims were likely asleep, some had defensive wounds, and each was stabbed multiple times, and there was no sign of SA. Evidence was collected at the crime scene, is now at the forensics lab for analysis. So this is a timeline and a location map that was provided by the Moscow Police Department. And we're going to go through a little bit now, but at least this is a good little map to show where the locations are. So over in the yellow, we have between 10 and 10 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. Kaylee and Maddie are at the Corner Club on Main Stream, located here. Then they ended up at the Grub Truck around 1:40 a.m., which is just down the street. And then this is off, but then Kaylee and Maddie end up at the residence, which is just down here. And then we have Ethan and Xena were at, starting at around 8 p.m. They're at the fraternity party located here. And then they ended up at the house, according to law enforcement, at 1:45. And the residence here is at 1122 King Road. Okay, so there are some inconsistencies there, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but at least this is a good, this is a map of all the locations. Okay, so first we're going to start with Kaylee and Maddie. On November 12th at 10 p.m., as stated earlier, Kaylee and Maddie went to the local bar, the Corner Club, which is at 202 North Main Street in downtown Moscow. They were spotted at the bar by Joe Vidot, or Vidot, I don't know how to say that. He was also known as tan shirt guy, tan hat guy in the Grub Truck video footage. And he said a lot of guys were talking to them at the Corner Club, and they were visibly drunk and super drunk. This is according to an article that he was quoted in. Now, please take this interview from Joe with a grain of salt. I've talked about it here, and I'm going to talk about it later when we talk about the Grub Truck, the appearance there, because there are a lot of holes. There's some things that don't add up in his interview, but if any of it is true, he's the only other person that's come out at the time, so I just wanted to add it in here for context, but keep it a grain of salt. At 1:30 a.m., they leave the Corner Club and arrive at 1:40 a.m. approximately to the Grub Truck, which is a local food vendor, which is located at 318 South Main Street. And this is where the live stream video was found on Twitch, and it's still up. It's still public as of right now. It's still public. And you can see the that they were there for approximately 10 minutes. And about 1:50, they get a private party, or Uber, as Kaylee's sister has indicated, ride home. And so also what's interesting, I didn't mention this here yet, but Joe also said that the girls, when the ride came, apparently the rider shouted out for them to get into the car. It was like, that to me sounds a little bit aggressive. So that's a little bit suspect. And because they were there and they wanted to leave, they actually, apparently, according to Joe, didn't pay for their food, which is very interesting. Also, why didn't they pay at the beginning? That I don't understand. But anyways, details there are a little fuzzy. So that's just something to consider. Don't take that as fact. And but that's what Joe said, according to Joe. And Joe was shown, he's the one that was wearing a tan cap and a tannish jacket, heavier set guy in the live stream video. And then this is the new information that was updated, that they arrived at 1:56 a.m. I don't know how they got that approximate. Possibly it's because I don't know if Kaylee's sister actually has the Uber information that shows what time they arrived, or maybe she did like a map quest and did time the directions and saw how long it took. But law enforcement updated their timeline to say 1:56, which is what the sister said as well. And then between 2:26 and 2:52 a.m., there were 10 calls between Kaylee and Maddie to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack Ducour. There were 7 calls from Kaylee. Her last call was at 2:52 a.m. and 3 calls from Maddie during that time as well. And so that is just very soon before the estimated time of the murders, which was sometime between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Okay, so now let's move on to Ethan and Xena. Starting at 8 p.m. on November 12th, Ethan and Xena were seen at the Sigma Chi house located at 735 Nez Perce Drive in the University of Idaho campus. And it's a little unclear. The original timeline from law enforcement had them there between 8 and 9. So there is definitely some type of a gap because there is no indication that he was there or that they were there at that party for that long. However, it's just a good marker. Okay, so they were there at 8. And then approximately 1:45, according to law enforcement, it's believed that they returned to the residence at 1122 King Road. Now, there are reports from Ethan's friend's parent on social media that indicate that Ethan was still out at around 2 a.m. So he may have arrived later than law enforcement indicates, perhaps around 2:15. And I've highlighted this because this is still a question for the timeline. And yes, maybe they did arrive at 1:45. However, it's possible that they arrived as late as 2:15 a.m. So there's a little inconsistency there in the timeline, and law enforcement hasn't updated that yet. And now the surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan. So on November 12th in the evening, according to law enforcement, Bethany and Dylan each went out separately in the Moscow community. And it is believed that both roommates returned home to the residence by 1 a.m. It's not specified what time each of them arrived. Each of them apparently went out separately, but they each arrived the morning of November 13th, which is Sunday, by 1 a.m. Presumably, they also went to sleep at that time because according to law enforcement, they didn't hear or they didn't wake up for the during the time of the murders. So sometime in the late morning, both of those surviving roommates wake up, and the details are not super clear, but when they found an unconscious roommate, they summoned friends to the residence because they believed one of the second floor victims had passed out and was not waking up. This is according to law enforcement. So a 911 call was placed at 11:58 a.m. from the cell phone of one of the surviving roommates inside the residence. Now, it was not placed by one of the roommates, but it was placed on the phone of one of the roommates inside the residence. And the 911 call requested aid for an unconscious person, and multiple people, which are the friends that they brought over, that they asked to come over, multiple people talked with the 911 dispatcher before Moscow police arrived at the location. And let's just go back here to 11:58, 911 call. They found the 2 victims. Officers entered the residence and found 2 victims on the second floor and 2 victims on the third floor. So once again, no forced entry, nothing was stolen, no sign of SA, believed to be a targeted event. So just kind of reiterating the facts here. And then once again, autopsies indicated that the 4 individuals were stabbed to death and they were likely asleep, although some had defensive wounds. So it's possible that they woke up or they heard something, or maybe they woke up during the attack and tried to defend themselves. So right now we're still waiting for the forensics report to come back and let us know what happened, what information has been found, if there's any link to any potential suspects and whatnot. So yeah, I would love to hear, I just wanted today to just go over the timeline, what we know so far, the facts that we know from law enforcement, with some additional facts that we've been told by some of the other individuals that have been involved. So what do you think? Is there some other piece of information that you've heard of or you've seen that could fill in the gaps here? Let me know. And what are your thoughts? Would love to hear what you think, and hopefully the forensics information comes soon and they're able to pin a suspect very soon, because there's a lot of people in the community worried that if this isn't targeted, then we have a serial killer on the loose. So very concerning for the Idaho State. And when you look at the case of Ted Bundy at Florida State University and Danny Rolling, which is in Gainesville, Florida, those 2 universities, University of Florida, those individuals were not from Florida and they committed crimes before they arrived in Florida. In some cases, other serial killers, they commit horrendous acts and they go from state to state. And so even, if there's a concern that maybe just like the surrounding states, well, no, some of these people went from all across the country. So important to be vigilant, important to be aware, and just to be mindful. have so much more information to share with you. I'll be putting out some videos over the next couple of days. If you like my style of covering true crime, emphasis on education, information, of course, advocacy, we want to support the victims, give voices to the victims, as well as advocate and eradicate any type of action like this in the future, then I would appreciate if you subscribe to my channel and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on this case, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button for notifications. Thank you.